Well, welcome back, everybody, to another episode of 100 Yards of Football. And today we have the distinct honor of talking about one of our first heroes. Vincent Turner is with me. Jeremiah Long is our engineer and producer. Thank you, Jeremiah. But Vincent, we're going to talk today about a guy that turned the page for so many different people, and people would fall in love with this next guy that we're going to discuss today. And I'm one of them as well. One of the first guys that I said, there's something different about this player. Now, I didn't get to see him in his younger days, but I certainly did when he was an NFL hero. Today, we're going to talk about Otis Taylor, number 89 with the Kansas City Chiefs. Vincent, he's from the Houston area, went to high school there. He had a few folks that have also attended high school, not at the same time as he did, but very famous Worthington High School. Tell us a little bit about your experience with Otis Taylor and his ties to Texas.
I'm going to say this before we get started, and I'm going to talk about his high school. But when you talk about a player that's in your life forever and a player that you look at and you just fall in love with, and every day you walk with him when you're a youngster, like I was in Memphis, Tennessee at 9 years old, you never forget him. And before we start today, it just really upsets me that Otis Taylor is not in the Hall of Fame, because the path he paved for all these great wide receivers. And of course, out of Worthington High School, as you just mentioned, how he paved the way for Cliff Branch, the great legendary Mike Singletary, Larry Mishaw, that played basketball at the University of Houston, David Lattin, who's on that Texas El Paso all-starting five that won the first NCAA tournament as all-starting five black players against Kentucky and Pat Riley. And then the great lead singer Terry Ellis in Vogue. That's the high school he came out of, and that's what he set. And then he took it on the Prairie View playing for the great Billy Nitz out of Griffin, Georgia. And he was a wide receiver. You know who the quarterback was? It was Jim Kearney, who started at free safety for the Kansas City Chiefs. And then all the great players who went to Prairie View: Jimmy Lee Hunt, Clem Daniels, Sam Adams, Alan Aldridge, Kenny Houston. But one thing that I'm going to say before I turn it back over to you, Mr. Harper LeBel, and I'm going to look at this screen, it upsets me, it bothers me that all these great receivers has played the position, from Jerry Rice to Randy Moss to Chris Carter to Julio Jones, even today with Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase. Nobody brings up Otis Taylor's name. That is a problem, because if you don't know your history, the young man out of Houston, Texas set the tone. And of course, you too, Mr. Terrell Owens. Back to you, Mr. LeBel.
Well, Otis was certainly a specimen and a man amongst boys in many ways. Born in Houston, Texas, August 11, 1942. So he was a baby boomer. And we mentioned Worthington High School. That's where he went. College, played well enough at Worthington to go to Prairie View A&M. Obviously a smaller school, but recognized early on that the historically HBCUs were not scouted the same way. I think the Dallas Cowboys get a lot of credit with Gil Brandt and Hank Stram for Tech Stram for putting together a scouting report that included HBCU players. But you also have to give credit to Lloyd Wells. Lloyd was the guy that scouted Otis out for Kansas City. He was drafted by the Philadelphia Eagles and the Kansas City Chiefs in the same year. People need to remember that the two leagues were still separated at that time. And the Eagles had picked him up in the 15th round. I think he was the 205th player overall. And then in 1965, the fourth round with the Kansas City Chiefs. So there was a monetary difference. The AFL didn't have the same money, but when you look at a fourth rounder versus a lower tier 12th, 13th, 15th rounder in the NFL, he obviously took the opportunity and the chance with the Kansas City Chiefs, and it paid off nicely for him. You'll see a bunch of different pictures in the lower right-hand corner where you are right now. That's Super Bowl I. Guess what? He got to play in that. The very first Super Bowl. Otis was a predominant starter. He was the guy that Lynn Dawson just absolutely loved throwing. And Lynn had said, if you just threw it in Otis's direction, you knew that he was going to catch it. So he was a difference maker from the very first time. And in Super Bowl IV, in the picture that pretty much is in the middle right there, one of the things that I noticed about Otis that turned me into a fan was the way that he always had his knees a little bit higher. He kicked his butt a little bit more with his feet. His arms were extended. He looked like a track guy. He looked like a sprinter when he was out there. Every time he ran a route, he looked like he was faster. He ran faster than everybody else. If he was a horse, he was a prancing horse. He wasn't a Clydesdale or a thoroughbred. He was a prancer. Gosh, he was so different from everybody else, just the way that he ran. And when he caught the ball, great things happened. Obviously, one of the great moments in his life was the Super Bowl IV catch that he had about the 40-yard line. He spins to the outside to avoid the defensive tackle. It wasn't Paul Krause. He was on that team, but that wasn't the first guy to make contact with him. 40 yards later, he's prancing in the end zone and sealing the deal for the Kansas City Chiefs to get their first Super Bowl. History was made when the Jets won Super Bowl III, and that's what kind of sealed the deal to allow the two leagues to play together, the AFL and the NFL. They changed it to where it was the AFC and the NFC. That's what we recognize now, but they were two separate leagues at that time that were being joined together. Super Bowl III was the first. Joe Namath, obviously we've talked about Joe and his ability to predict and guarantee a win. Of course he's going to say a guarantee. But the next year, the following year, and that's where Otis is in the middle of your picture right there. Otis was a difference maker in Super Bowl IV, and that kind of made it clear that the AFL had better talent. They had younger, bigger, stronger, faster guys. And Kansas City led the way with that, didn't they, Vincent? They had some stars on that team that came from HBCUs or from smaller schools that ended up making names for themselves and being heroes today because of it.
Like I said earlier, I'm going to give credit to Hank Stram. You brought up probably the most important person that people have not even heard of on this show today. That was really the mastermind behind the HBCUs getting in the National Football League, along with Bill Nunn, was Lloyd Wells. But I'm going to leave it with this. Otis Taylor, and to the Taylor family, he should be in the Hall of Fame. I know one year he averaged 22 yards a catch, but the athletic ability that he had back then, he set the tone, as I mentioned, for all these other great receivers that's making money now. Calvin Johnson, Chad Johnson, Marvin Harrison. And I'm going to put this out to you, Shannon Shaw. You out here talking about everything else, but you don't even mention Otis Taylor. None of y'all. And what I'm going to remember most about Otis Taylor, I'm going to leave it at this. As you just brought up, Mr. LeBel, the Kansas City Chiefs. The Kansas City Chiefs. Robert Holmes, Southern University. Jimmy Marcellus, Tennessee University. Buck Buchanan, Grambling. Jim Kearney, Prairie View. Otis Taylor, Prairie View. Lenny Dawson from Alliance, Ohio, the University of Purdue. Mike Garrett, USC. One of the greatest teams ever that doesn't get their respect. And for you, the National Football League, I'm sorry, Harper, today. For this man not to be in the Hall of Fame, it's a shame. You should be embarrassed. Even you, I'm even talking about the groups out here. The SWAC group, the HBCU group. Y'all don't even talk about Otis Taylor. None of y'all. But you know what? My love today goes to Mr. Otis Taylor, 6'3", 215, 5-slammer jammer of the National Football League back then. Back to you, Mr. Harper LeBel.
Yeah, you got to throw in Curly Culp, Willie Lanier, Fred the Hacksaw Williamson. There's some great players that were part of that. And I always remember, I don't have a piece of paper. I got to get here when he rolls it up. Hank Stram walking along the side. Hey, Mr. Official, that's a good call right there. We're going to matriculate down the field. My God. So 2 Super Bowls, 1 Super Bowl win. What else do you need for qualifications in a time where the league was not throwing like they do now? Otis was still leading the league. You said the 22 yards that he had there. Here are some of his stats. He was a Super Bowl champion, 2-time AFL champion, AFL MVP in the championship in 1969, the UPI AFC Player of the Year in 1971, 2 times he was a first-team All-Pro. He was first-team All-NFL in 1966 when he was just getting his career started. In 67, he was a second-team All-NFL. He was a 2-time Pro Bowler, AFL All-Star in 1966, receiving touchdown co-leader in 1967, NFL receiving yards leader in 1971. What else do you want? 417 catches. He had over 7,306 yards. He had 57 touchdowns. And if that number isn't big enough for you in an era where that's a big number, you need to reconsider NFL and put a Legends guy on the ballot again. And let's not see if the man who pranced, the man who danced, the man who slid down the field, 57 touchdowns, including one in Super Bowl IV that was meaningful. It's the NFL Hall of Fame, not Hall of Stats. He's one of those guys that is one of the more famous players that we all. Vincent, final thoughts about our friend, our hero, Otis Taylor.
When you're looking at this game and during the time in the late 60s and early 70s, there was so many great football players that I looked up to. I was like a little kid in Memphis, Tennessee, just watching these players play. Of course, everybody knows that I was in love with O.J. Simpson when he was at USC. I was in love with Eldridge Dickey when he was at Tennessee State. But I have to say, and it's been a lot of great players that's played this game, but when I go to my grave, and hopefully I can stay on this earth for a long time, Otis Taylor is going to be one of the top 3 players in my life. I really looked up to him. I loved him. As you mentioned, Harper, the ability, as you said, looking like a track star with the knees kicking up, that touchdown reception he had in Super Bowl IV, that 46-yarder, that's something that is embedded in my heart that I'm going to take to my grave. And before I end today, my final words to the Taylor family, and this is real serious. Even though your relative or your husband, Mrs. Taylor, is not in the Hall of Fame, but here in 100 Yards of Football, we vote him in the Hall of Fame as maybe the one first players if we had a Hall of Fame vote. My love, my respect to Otis Taylor, one of the greatest receivers that played this game and that set the tone for all the receivers that's playing today. And so when you turn on the TV on your Sundays, you're looking at a Drake London, you're looking at a Justin Jefferson, looking at a Jamar Chase, and even a Tariq Hill. You better put respect on Otis Taylor's name. Houston, Texas, Prairie View University. Back to you, Mr. Harper LeBel.
Yeah, he played in some great games with some great people. And again, the picture that you're looking at on your screen there, pretty much in the middle, he put the white tape on too. He had the spats. That to me, he got sweatbands, elbow pads, changed in the face mask over the years. But that picture right there, man, that is worth its weight in gold for me. Looking fast, running down the field, but he didn't wear white shoes. Kansas City was a black shoe wearing, and everybody had black spot belts back in those days. That was the way it was. But Nike and Adidas and Puma and you name whatever, Reebok didn't have shoes back in those days at the NFL level. But Otis made his shoes look sweet. And that card that's in the lower left-hand side of your screen, I remember having that. And that's one of the cards. I probably still have it in the box of cards that I've got upstairs in the attic. But I'll tell you one thing. He was a difference maker. And you're right, Vincent. The Hall of Fame, not the Hall of Stats, should reconsider and add Otis. They have just about everybody else on that Kansas City Chiefs team. You might as well include one of the stars that helped make it happen. 4, Vincent Turner. 4, Jeremiah Long, our engineer and producer. I am Harper LeBel saying thank you for tuning in to another episode of 100 Yards of Football. Today we honored the great Otis Taylor, number 89. We want to thank you for tuning in today. We hope you have a terrific day. Thank you for watching 100 Yards of Football.